All right, time to talk some Illini side of this top 20 matchup at Penn State. Let's bring in Joey Wagner. Joey, I've gotten a couple extra hours of sleep the last couple of days, tried to go a little longer than we did when I was out in Lincoln, Nebraska. That was a heck of a trip, heck of a game, and Illinois finds itself victorious, and that sets up a huge game here at Penn State. You ready for another big road trip?
I am. I was saying last night, I said I'm home for 3 weeks after this, and it just so happens two of the longest ones, driving ones in the Big Ten, were back to back. So we'll get through that, Jeremy. Worst ways to make a living. Saw a really good game on Friday night. Awesome atmosphere. Whiteout energy at Penn State on Saturday.
A lot of noise about that, apparently.
A lot of noise. Internet's full of noise. Crazy world. A lot of smells.
I don't know if Brett Bielema should have said like whatever the hell that is. I understand what he was saying. It's like it's not a whiteout, but you're doing whiteout energy. What is that? It's kind of I love this stuff, like the little back and forth. But can we report truthfully? Like that's the most important thing here. But I get it, Penn State fans getting a little up in arms about that. I like it. They're a little perturbed by Illinois, right? And that's a good place to be when you're Illinois and you're 4-0 and you're a threat to Penn State. We'll see if they can win as 18-point underdogs here. But Illinois getting under some people's feathers here. Like Nebraska never wants to do a Friday football game again, Joey, after they lost. Like a little whiny there. I kind of, it's interesting.
I mean, winning makes you annoying, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's what it is. That's why, like in college basketball, you hate those guards who have been there for a decade and they've just kicked the crap out of your team for all that time. Like, winning's annoying for opposing fan bases, and it clearly, let's be honest, with this whiteout thing, it strikes me as maybe Penn State thought the game against Washington was going to be bigger. That hasn't played out. This Illinois game has really set itself up to be a very big game between two top 20 opponents, and they can't really rebrand it, right? So it's kind of like it's like a pop-up party, right? Like, hey, we'll try to make this happen here.
It's a sign of respect by James Franklin.
Absolutely.
Remembers the last time Brett Bielema in Illinois came in, and I think he understands his team has not been tested really quite yet, and that this could be a test, and that this could be a way more competitive game than a lot of people thought coming into the season. But Illinois is 4-0 for just the second time since 1951. I went back, Joey. Harry Truman was president at that time, so that takes it back. One of two teams with two AP top 25 victories. Tennessee was the other team so far, and they're the number 3 team in the country. So let's start with this. So let's start by looking back a little bit, because I feel like this game at Nebraska taught us a lot about this team. We learned a lot about this team. So let's start our 6-pack of questions with number 1. What encouraged you most, Joey, about the Illini offense in the win at Nebraska?
The way they ran the ball. It has to be the way they ran the ball, because we talked about it at length. I know the team was they were no stranger to the conversations about them being able to run the ball. I wouldn't know how well they could do it against that Nebraska defensive front. The offensive line really played its best game of the season with respect to Eastern Illinois, right? I mean, that environment, that opponent, the way that defense is set up to stop the run, the way that line played and got on their blocks and strained all the way through those. Matt Rule made it a point to say, hey, we got to get off blocks better. That's what Illinois wants, right? Like, they want to get on those blocks and hold them. And you end up running for 166 yards, Jeremy, on 39 attempts. And really, by the end of that game, wore down that Nebraska team on the ground and led yourself to an overtime win. So how do you repeat that? How do you come close to repeating that? I don't know. But, man, that paired with the offensive game, or the passing game, rather, that was a really, really encouraging sign for Illinois.
Yeah, and I think the key stat, Joey, is what they did after halftime. 129 yards, 5 yards per carry, and just kind of imposed their will against a really stout and physical Nebraska defensive line. Now, Nebraska needs more depth because they need to be able to rotate Ty Robinson and Nash Hutmaker out a little bit. But the fact that they leaned on those guys and were able to get yards and chew up some clock and really just balance out their offense was really impressive. And I thought Josh Kreutz and Josh Geske had their best games. I thought J.C. Davis had his best game as a run blocker late in that one. I thought Tanner Arkin had his best game as a run blocker, and I thought Zy Chrysler and Melvin Priestley continued to be solid. But it wasn't just on the offensive line, right? Like the running backs, I thought were better. That was by far Caden Fagan's best game against an FBS opponent. Like, he just hit the hole hard. His vision was better. His decisiveness was better. And you see what happens when he gets to the second level. If he gets to the line of scrimmage, as Jay Lehman said on Monday, he's probably going to get 4 or 5 yards. If he gets to the second level, he's probably getting a first down because he's going to carry some people. So I thought he had his best game by far. The other thing I would mention here to build off on it was Barry Lunny Jr. I think you have a really good offensive coordinator. We've talked about this, but I just think what he was able to dial up in the red zone, what he's been able to execute, but also what he leaned into, which we talked about last week, was lean into that RPO, use the pass to set up the run, because that RPO, the safety has to make a choice. Do I want to sit back and bracket Pat Bryant and Zachary Franklin, or do I want to come up and help stop Caden Fagan? If they come back or if they stay back, Caden Fagan and Luke Altmaier are probably going to gain yards if they make the right decision. If they come up, it's easy. It's pitch and catch for Altmaier and 2 of the best wide receivers in the Big Ten. So I love that he adjusted. I loved what he called. And I just love the symbiosis between him and Luke Altmaier. Like year 2 for them, Joey, they've taken it to another level, and you're seeing what can happen. Like, transfers we think of as immediate impact, but what can happen with an extra year of those guys? Maybe we're even seeing it with T.R. Edwards on the other side of the ball, having a couple of years with Terrence Jameson, but year 2 of Luke Altmaier and Barry Lunny, that marriage is going very well.
Continuity matters, man. It matters. And I get it in the portal era, especially with quarterbacks, right? Like, you're either at the top of the top or you're fighting for that continuity, right? As it's kind of musical chairs going in the transfer portal with quarterbacks. But when you get that second year, that third year with an offensive coordinator who's dialed into everything you do, Barry Lunny is dialed into every step Luke Altmaier takes, and Luke Altmaier knows what his offensive coordinator is thinking. And I understand maybe the constantly talking about RPOs. Some people are like, okay, we get it.
It's so hard.
It's a key for everything offensively right now. And not only the play calls, right? Like the way that you stress defenses, that's obvious, right? But that's not unique to Illinois. I think the way that Luke Altmaier is operating in the RPO, that is the story. It's not just, hey, Barry's got this in his bag and he's going to run it, and you got a quarterback who really understands the layers and the nuances and has the skill to make those passes or to keep it and go out and make another threat. Like, when you've got one play that can threaten you in 3 ways, that's when things get a little rocky for defenses. And I think when we talk about RPO, we're really talking about, in a lot of ways, the way Luke Altmaier is running this show here and the level he's taking this offense to.
Well, because when it's run well and, making good decisions with it, which Luke is this year, better than last year, it's got answers for everything, right? Like, going to the wide receiver opens up things for the run game. Luke Altmaier keeping it opens up things where the defensive ends might not crash on the running back.
And Jay did a wonderful job of breaking that down. I would encourage anyone to go to the film review, because Jay talks about those exact things right there, and he does it at a really high level.
Yeah, so it's just like you kind of have answers for most of those things. It takes a great defensive effort to not have it open. Now, you have to execute it. You have to read it right. But you have guys executing and reading it right at a really high level right now, and it just opens up the rest of the offense. So that's why we keep bringing it up, because when they've gone to it, beginning of the first half against Kansas, beginning of the first half against Central Michigan, early in the game against Nebraska, it just has opened up this offense. So,
and then if you get one-on-one with Luke or with Pat Bryant on the outside or Zachary Franklin, that's a matchup that Illinois will take 100 times out of 100, right? It's in a lot of ways built through that RPO kind of meshing this all together.
It's why Zachary Franklin and UTSA just beat the crap out of Illinois. That RPO with Frank Harris and Zachary Franklin. All right, 2. What encouraged you most about the Illini defense in their win over Nebraska? Go ahead, Joey.
I think it's probably got to be the pressure they've continued to generate. I know we talked about this, Jeremy, after the Central Michigan game in our post-game pod, but the first game was Eastern, right? And it was just kind of, okay, get through this. Don't show a lot if you can get out of showing a lot. And obviously, there's respect you've got to pay to Eastern, but you don't want to unload your playbooks on either side of the ball. And then Kansas was very, holy crap, Jalen Daniels, we can't let him get loose or it's going to make our life really difficult. But you've seen in the last 2 weeks, when you've got more pocket-oriented quarterbacks, the way that Aaron Henry likes to draw it up, and whether that's, as Jay has pointed out really well, the stunts and the Texas stunts are, as we can see, as normal people with eyes and not Jay Lehman brain, like blitzers coming in from linebacker, like that pressure that they've generated causes confusion. One, it heats up those quarterbacks to make them uncomfortable. And you're seeing with quarterbacks that prefer to be in the pocket or maybe are less Jalen Daniels with their legs, that, hey, Illinois is comfortable in sending it and trusting. What you've seen really is the trust in the secondary because you're willing to send that. And then your defensive front's just playing really good ball right now and getting after the quarterback without sending a ton extra.
I love that they were able to win a game, Joey, without winning the takeaway battle, right? They had one takeaway in this game. In the first half, Dylan Raiola was just kind of piecing them apart, right? Kind of sat in zone and, you're just trying to keep things in front of you. And Illinois did a solid job of that. But in the second half, Nebraska had 7 points, 110 yards. This includes overtime, minus 31 rushing yards. Now take out the sacks, but still, like, they barely ran the ball. Like, there were some moments Dowdell in that third quarter felt like he was getting going. That defensive front, for all the credit they get for the pressures late and the sacks late, they really, shut down that running game. Like, I'm thinking of even early in that game when they're first and goal at the 3 and you force them into a field goal like that. Those are big moments for that defense. So I like that they showed that, man, they can bow up and stop the run a little bit, because that is still a concern. And it's certainly a concern going up against Penn State with the running backs they have, the offensive line talent that they have. Drew Aller can make plays with his legs. The fact that they were able to kind of contain that and force Nebraska into some obvious passing situations where they could pin their ears back and get after the quarterback. And to be honest with you, the third down defense was a big concern for me. After that first half, they were 7 of 10 Nebraska. Second half, you were 1 of 5. So you're able to get off the field. But I think the run offense and run defense were some of the most encouraging things about that game, because that's going to matter a ton going into Big Ten play. And there were 2 question marks we had going into that game.
Yeah, and in terms of run defense, it's not going to get any easier this week, right? With Singleton and Allen, and those 2 can do some real damage to anyone, right? But when we talk about this run defense, we've got to talk about Dennis Briggs, because he was really billed pretty high from spring ball into fall camp and during the summer by this coaching staff. And we saw, right, when he was healthy at Florida State, he was productive, but he's playing really good ball right now, Jeremy, and he's helped solidify that and increase that pressure. And I think, like, kind of in a way that we talked after 2022, that, like, hey, defensive back play can still be good when you're not doing whatever it was and all of that Sidney Brown and Devin Witherspoon and Quan Martin were doing. Defensive line play can still be really good when you're not wrecking offenses like Johnny Newton did at the level that he did and the regularity that he did it. And I don't mean that as a knock to Dennis Briggs. Johnny Newton was a second-round pick, and he destroyed games. But, like, I just don't want Dennis Briggs and T-Rod Edwards, their presence or play, to be overlooked just because it doesn't look like Johnny Newton doing Johnny Newton things, if that makes sense.
No, yeah, I think this first unit, and when they put that bare front out there and Gabe Atkins on the interior, I feel pretty good. I feel like that group is a really good Big Ten group, which we had question marks about, right? Like, can T-Rod Edwards be a good starter? Can he be that next nose tackle who succeeds? He's got 8 pressures, and I think he's been really good against the run. Yeah, he's undersized a little bit, but it's amazing. When I watch film, there's a couple plays every game, Joey, where he's like on a 15-degree angle, like pushing on somebody, and he finds a way to hold his ground.
That one that he like corkscrewed between a double team? He had no business making that play.
He could split those double teams, so he's been better than I expected. Dennis Briggs, 9 pressures, a couple sacks through a couple games. Feels like he's really starting to come into his own. Gabe Atkins, 8 pressures. Seth Coleman finally got awarded that sack in Lincoln, but he's got 10 pressures. Alec Bryant, 6 pressures. You're getting, instead of relying on really what was one guy last year. I thought Denzel Jackson ended the season well. Keith Randolph was injured and just wasn't the same player. You have a front 5 in those guys. We feel really good about. Joe Barna's obviously made an impact. Pat Farrell, I think, has played some good football the last couple of weeks. Hopefully he can continue to bring on Alex Bray and some of these other guys, but that veteran front 5 has been better than I expected, but we knew they had talent, but it's really starting to shine through. So Terrence Jamison, Clint Symptom, obviously get a lot of credit for that. And so does the secondary, giving them some time to get after the quarterback. Alec Bryant's first sack was a total coverage sack. So the fact that those guys, it all goes hand in hand. Johnny Newton struggled to get more sacks last year because the secondary couldn't hold up. Now you have 2, I think, good units that are making up for a good defense.
We should talk. I talked to Terrence Jamison. It'll be either Thursday or Friday. We'll have this out. But the nose guard development with him at Illinois, like, it's not just a coincidence at this point, right? You take Rod Perry, who frankly was fine in 2020, right? It's not like he was some revelation. He was a big returner for Illinois to have into 2021. Going from him to Calvin Avery, who you get the most of. No one could get the most of Calvin Avery like Illinois, like this coaching staff did in his final season at that position. You take Ohio transfer Denzel Daxon, who kind of was like last year's Melvin Priestley in a way when he committed, where we were like, okay, depth, that's fine. Then he ends up being a starter and has a good role, gets an undrafted free agent camp invite with the Cowboys. Now you go to T-Raw Edwards, like just that. I know that position doesn't rack up pressures at like those other two defensive line positions or those outside backers, but that is such a key position for what they do defensively. It's thankless. That's why Aaron Henry spent a day and a half raving to us about T-Raw Edwards on Monday. I just like Terrence Jamison could write a book about it at this point, right? Because that development at that position is really impressive, honestly. Now, you maybe in an ideal world hope Jeremiah Warren can take that for multiple years and you don't have to keep going through these one-year senior stopgaps. But man, that position is really, I hope it's getting the proper attention that it should. And T-Raw Edwards' play is very much a part of that.
I like the talent they have long-term there with Jeremiah Warren and Nietzsche Sledge. And I think Isaiah White's going to be a player. I mean, we saw him down on the field against Kansas. That is a grown man already. So they have a nice group there. Eddie Turk could potentially play there as well, and he's a grown man. So they have definitely prioritized that position in recruiting. All right, number 3, Joey. What does this game against Penn State mean for the Illini program?
This is such a house money game. I've been covering this team since 2018. So maybe you've got a bigger frame of reference for a comparison. There's no, like, if you lose at Penn State, no one's jumping off of the Illinois bandwagon, provided you probably don't get 63 burgered, right? Or 63 nothing in the way that we've seen in the past. But you're probably going to wake up and be ranked again next week, going into your open week.
Yeah.
Then you've got Purdue. But if you win, all of a sudden, Jeremy, if you win this game, the buzz on Sunday is like, is this a sneaky Big Ten playoff team? And like that gets louder, and it's not just early season fun. That could get pretty real in a hurry if you were to go to Penn State and win. So what it means is a good chance to make your statement, right? To be like, hey, we really are that frisky, weird, sneak into the playoff in the Big Ten team. And if you lose, no one's batting an eye, right? As long as you don't get blown out, it doesn't matter.
This is the ultimate, and Brett Bielema would say, well, we can lose a game, but there's nothing to lose and everything to gain for Illinois.
Yes.
And to me, that makes them dangerous, because if you lose, you lost to a top 10 team on the road as an 18-point underdog. You will still be ranked because you have 2 AP top 25.
You know, whiteout, no less.
Whiteout, no less. But if you win, you should be in the top 15, I think top 12 of the rankings. You should be in the college football playoff discussion, right? You have put yourself in that spot. Now you still have a lot of work to do. You got to get to 10 wins most likely to do that, unless you beat another top 10 team and end up losing 3 games somehow. But Illinois would put itself in that. And then the even tougher thing would be into the Big Ten championship game discussion. Like if Illinois would have an open path to that, Big Ten championship game's even tougher than a college football playoff spot now. So, but you would open up those realms of possibilities because no one would have a better resume than you. That'd be 3 top AP top 25 victories, including one over a Penn State team that probably will win 9 or 10 or more games, even if you beat them. So this would, I have a column idea ready, and I'm not going to say it quite yet on here, but this would take the Illinois program to what Wisconsin has been, to what Iowa has been. It's like, oh, look out here. This team might have a way of getting into this national contention. And it sounds crazy to say, but if you go on the road and beat Penn State, you open up those possibilities. And then all of a sudden, we're talking about what is Brett Bielema's extension? What is Barry Loney's extension? What is Aaron Henry's extension? What can they do in recruiting with this? How much does this open the door for all of that? But most importantly, it gets you to 5-0 with a couple more big games coming up, but with a real path to 10 wins and talking about things that we haven't talked about with this program in a long time when it comes to Big Ten championships and those things. but ever in the modern era of college football playoff and all of that.
Yeah, I think when you say like suddenly you become Wisconsin or whatever you want to make that the artist formerly known as the Big Ten West top dog to be, because that's kind of what we would be talking about. It's not this just in isolation if they were to win, which is tough, right? Like Penn State is good. Like that's tall order. But it's not just that on its own, because they had that in 21, but there wasn't the body of work yet, right? Like you hadn't
22,
seen, no, 21 when they went and won in 9 overtimes.
Okay, sure.
You hadn't had the body of work to that point. It was kind of it was a herky-jerky start and 1 possession losses, and you didn't really see the bones and the structure of what the rebuild could be. Or maybe if you saw that, you didn't see the clearer picture. But now you've got this start. You've seen 2022. You can chalk up 2023 to however you want to chalk it up, whether it be a lack of experience, a lack of talent, a combination of both, missed opportunities, however you want to phrase that. But there's a lot of game there, and there's a lot of construction kind of done on this rebuild, where all of a sudden it's like, okay, this is why we think it could be that, because they've shown pieces of that. And as we talk about this, let's get an alert. I'm sure you got the same. The Athletic just pushed out a Illinois college football playoff potential story, right? So like, this is a real discussion to be had. But when we zoom out a little bit more, we're talking about, because you've just seen more of this be put in place. And it's not that, which was really in 21, a one-off win, right? Yeah. Like you've gotten the pieces there.
Yeah. In 2022, and you combine it with a 2024, that could be another great year relatively for Illinois. It shows that this is not some fluke thing, that this is 2 out of 3 years. And the other 2 years of Brett Bielema was here, they just missed out on a bowl game, which Illinois doesn't do that often. So, but even if they lose this game, Joe, and they look like they're competitive, it's like, this team could win 8 or 9 games. And that is a hell of a season for Illinois football.
And then with that, real quick, I know we got to move on, but with this new playoff and the bowl structure, the 5th Big Ten team, which could be Illinois, you're still looking at what we would consider, and what should still be considered, pretty prime real estate for a bowl game.
Citrus?
Right? Like, yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like the Citrus Bowl could be the 5th team in the Big Ten or 4th team in the Big Ten. And Illinois, through 4 games, has put itself in a position to be in that discussion, which I didn't really think about until we were talking around a little bit today. It's like, that's right. Like, that's kind of how this shakes out, which is a big deal for Illinois, even if it's not the playoff. To be in those hungover January 1st or 2nd games is a big deal.
Who's hungover? That's you and me, right? Not everybody.
Yeah. Else. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And would be if present too. Yes.
Yeah. All right. Number 4. What gives you the most optimism about Illinois against Penn State, Joey?
I just think it's the body of work in which they've thrown the football through the first 4 weeks, because Penn State, if Penn State's vulnerable at anything, and you saw it against Bowling Green, it's pass defense, right? They're allowing 2. Oh, crap, it froze. They are near the bottom 4th of the Big Ten. I'm pulling that up so I actually have numbers to present here. They do allow some yards through the air, and I think Illinois has shown through the first 4 games that they can do something through the air and passing the ball and lightening up the box a little bit here and opening up that run game.
Yeah,
I feel good about that.
Yeah, if they get protection, you give Luke Altmaier and this wide receiver crew time, I think they can play well. Like AJ Harris is a really good corner. He's a former 5-star prospect, just a sophomore, but he barely gets targeted. He's probably going to be a very high draft pick. They have some good safeties, but KJ Winston, who's one of their top NFL draft prospects, he's got a long-term injury and isn't going to be available in this game. So they're kind of working in some new starters after losing some guys, Daquan Hardy, Kalen King to the NFL. They got some newer starters that didn't look all that great against Bowling Green that I think Luke Altmaier and this wide receiver crew can take advantage of. So I do think that passing attack gives you some optimism, as long as that offensive line and the running backs and tight ends can give Luke Altmaier enough time, because up front, obviously, they're very good.
Yeah, I need to correct myself. They're 7th in the Big Ten in passing yards allowed, 144.3. I don't know where I was.
But that Bowling Green game, I mean, all right, Kent State, like we can go into some of these numbers, but like Kent State completed 2 passes. West Virginia's quarterback was bad against Penn State. Penn State obviously had a lot to do with that. But Bowling Green did show some weaknesses. I mean, they scored 24 points. Connor Bazelak threw for a whole bunch of yards. So I think Luke Altmaier and Illinois are obviously better than that. So that is a question that Penn State has about itself: is can the secondary be a top part of a top tier defense?
Yeah, and now when we say that, we have to take into consideration, as you mentioned, the tackles, the tight ends, the running backs in particular have got to give Luke Altmaier and those wide receivers the time, because the Penn State defensive front is really, really good. And they get a lot of pressure on opposing quarterbacks. And I know you talk about guys like J.C. Davis, like Melvin Priestley, who wanted to go to the Big Ten to test themselves. This is a pretty big test, right? It's a huge opportunity for those guys to show their draft stock against some of the better edge rushers. And I know Barry Lundy talked about like the quickest and twitchiest defense that Illinois has seen to date. And like that's a huge part of this, right? Like, yeah, maybe there's some room in the secondary to get the ball, but you've got to have time to do it. Luke Altmaier has largely been protected pretty well this season, but this is a hell of a task against that defensive front.
Yeah, Abdul Carter usually is on the right side, so J.C. Davis has a chance to make some money by stymieing him a little bit. He's going to get some pressure at some point because he's that good. But also then on the left side, they usually have this Danny Dennis Sutton, who is projected mid-round draft pick. So Melvin Priestley, you'll have the chance to kind of make a name for himself as an NFL draft prospect, because I think he can be that with the way he has started this season. But you have two guys that you feel like can battle. And I do think Caden Fagan's been good recently in pass protection. So he can help out as well. Can I say special teams, Joey? Right now, Illinois is 16th in the country in special teams efficiency, according to ESPN. Penn State is number 116, I believe, 109 in special teams efficiency. Now, they haven't had many opportunities to kick field goals because they've been scoring touchdowns, but their field goal kicker is 3 for 7 in his career on field goals. I think Illinois' field goal kicking operation, 8 for 9 so far this season with 2 50-yarders, is better. They've been better with the punt return game. Hank Beatty, as you said, Joey, wasn't aware of your game as a punt returner, averaging 15.6 yards on 8 returns so far. Ethan Machowski, 17 touchbacks on 25 kickoffs. Hugh Robertson has been pinning him inside the 20. He's only got 2 touchbacks to 9 inside the 20. So I think Robbie Disher's crew is, you get into a close game, these margins matter. And Illinois has been winning with the turnovers. They've been winning with the penalties, and they've been winning with special teams. So I think that's another reason that if you get into a close game, you have a chance. But that's why I feel like it's so important to get into a close game, Joey. Make this a close game going to the fourth quarter, just like Nebraska, because Illinois had an edge there. Like they have been the more clutch team here recently, at least this season, against Kansas in a close game, against Nebraska in a close game. Luke Altmaier's elevated his game. The defense has gotten some big stops. So I think put the pressure on Penn State, because there is more pressure on them. This is a big year for James Franklin. You got a wide open college football playoff where 10 wins gets you in. You have to do it this year. You got a more open chance to get to the college or the Big Ten championship game. So if this whiteout energy, all of a sudden, like this crowd is anxious in the fourth quarter, Illinois has shown they love being the underdog. They love winning, playing on the road. They're 8-6 in Big Ten play under Brett Bielema on the road, which is an amazing stat for this program. I think just make this a close game, and I feel good about Illinois giving itself a chance to win.
Yeah, I think you also have to point out that Illinois has been in those, right? Yep. With Nebraska, with Kansas. How much is that worth? I don't know, because Penn State, eventually talent still matters too, right? And Penn State's got a ton of it at every level. But I sent this to our group chat yesterday. Somehow I feel like Brett Bielema is going to contort this whiteout energy Twitter spectacle into some sort of motivating tactic for his team. I don't know what it looks like. I don't know how he does it, but it just feels like it's gotten to the point that he's going to figure out a way to turn that and make him think that no one was – I don't know what he's going to say, right? But it just feels like he's got something up his sleeve to that, and I don't know if it's going to matter, but that's been my babbling theory, that somehow that he's going to turn that.
Blackout a whiteout or something like that is driving to a blackout instead of a whiteout.
Something. And look, here's the thing. I say that. It's really good. Like, it might not matter that he wants to do that, but we've covered Brett Bielema long enough to know he's going to try to turn this thing into a way. Because this guy, here's the thing. His guys will follow him, right? Like we saw that in 2022, and I know it can get old for us, or maybe for fans who watch every post game and you hear basically the coaches say what Brett says. I get it, right? Like it doesn't always feel, sometimes it feels coach speaky, but those guys follow this guy, right? Like they're all in on what he says, and that's why I even bring it up. I just think if he can find a way to twist it and make those guys kind of see something that he sees, there's value to that, and he's still got to go out and execute against a really, really good team. But they believe in their head coach, man. That's a huge deal here.
If they're repeating their coach, that's usually a good thing, because it says there's a lot of buy-in, but it's also working, so it's easy to buy. And it's what he's doing right now. Number 5, what concerns you most about Penn State, Joey?
All of Penn State.
Talent.
Yeah, the talent, the sheer talent. They've got so much of it. Like, it's absurd, the amount of talent Penn State has. But I think, we touched on it before, Jeremy, in all seriousness, that defensive front. Because if we saw last year Luke Altmaier under a ton of pressure as they were trying to figure out the mess that was the right side of the offensive line. And Luke Altmaier threw picks, and he was early in his real career as a starter, and the offense just never got itself going. I think the pressure had a ton to do with that. And obviously he was throwing a lot more as that score got away from Illinois. But that front can really wreck things. We've seen good defensive fronts across college football just throw wrenches, and even the best game plan. So as good as we know Barry Lunny is, and the continuity he has with Luke Altmaier and the talent on the outside, a good front can wreck that in a hurry. And there's so much talent up there. That's concerning. It's concerning because if you can't get that pass game going, all of a sudden it could be a really long night at Happy Valley.
Yeah, they're so quick, so twitchy. They aren't the biggest. So that's where you want your size of Geske and Chrysler and JC Davis and Melvin Pre. You really want to wear on those guys, and why the running game is so important, to just soften those guys up a little bit, make them hesitate before getting after the quarterback, because Will Johnson's coming up, Mason Graham is coming up, but Abdul Carter is one of the best players they will play all year. He is so twitchy. Tyler did a great job of reminding me Johnny Newton was on the field and had a great game against Penn State, but I thought Abdul Carter was the biggest problem for that Penn State defense, or was the biggest problem on that Penn State defense last year, more than Chop Robinson, more than Kalen King and Daquan Hardy. He was just everywhere. So those guys are going to win some battles, and Luke has to live to play another day, right? Like, take the sack if you have to, take a short loss, get up in the pocket, take a -1 yard loss, or get a 1 yard gain. That's more important than trying to force it under pressure down the field, because that's where he got in trouble. So, yeah, he's certainly got to learn from that.
And the value of starting, right? Like the value of experience and understanding that is certainly going to be – I don't expect that turnover margin for Luke Altmaier this time around.
Those have been hidden yards with him of running and just getting like 2 or 3 yard gain. Those have been real hidden yards for this offense, where maybe he feels that pressure and just escapes and finds a route to get a positive gain, or to negate a huge loss. Like those are big because they don't kill drives.
Yeah, 100%. And like it's kind of in the same way we talked about with Caden Fagan falling forward so much. Like those 2 or 3 yards are hidden, not taking a sack and getting pushed back there, putting your lineman in kind of like a vulnerable spot to get called for a penalty because you're running here and there. Like that matters too. And picking up 2 versus losing 5, 6, 10. I mean, this offense is much just taking a step forward. Like any offense, you're not built to go off script like that, right? Like that, there's a reason 5, 10 yard penalties are just so killer for a lot of offenses across the country.
This kind of speaks to the talent here on Penn State, but their offense is number 2 in the country in explosive play percentage this season. They're averaging 6.3 plays of 20 plus yards, 3.3 plays of 30 plus yards this season. What has Illinois done well, really, defensively, besides takeaways, Joey? It's limiting those explosive plays. Like against Kansas, which had 20 chunk plays a year ago, they only had 6 this season. So their ability to stop that, I think Miles Scott's been great at that. I think their corners haven't gotten beat all that much. But we know Andy Kotelnicki's offense has been a problem for them. And Nicholas Singleton is a lot like Devin Neal, only he's a little bigger, at 6 foot, 225 pounds. He's incredibly quick, good receiver out of the backfield. He's averaging about 9 yards per carry. Katron Allen's really big and physical. They have a talented offensive line. And then Drew Allar's just really putting the ball downfield. I still think his receivers are a little unproven to me at this point. They got to show it against the best secondary that they have played. But the tight end, Tyler Warren, Matthew Bailey is going to have his hands full. This is one of the best tight ends in the country. I know most people think that's Colston Loveland out of Michigan, who's probably going to be a first-round draft pick. But Tyler Warren's going to be a very high draft pick as well. 6'6", 260, great athlete, great hands, makes plays after the catch. So really limiting those explosives. And like they did against Nebraska for the most part, like they did against Kansas, Joey, I think the key is just making them go 10 or 12 plays to get to the end zone, right? Like, because if you have more plays, there's more opportunities for mistakes. Drew Aller doesn't throw many interceptions in his career, but you have more plays to get there. It opens up more opportunities for fumbles, interceptions, penalties, whatever it is to hurt drives.
Yeah, and we saw it at Nebraska, right? It's like a 14, 15 play drive that ended in a field goal. You'll take that every single day.
18 plays.
Yeah, you'll run with that every day. And look, you still got to execute in the red zone, right? That's not easy. Everything's so condensed. So yeah, you don't get beat over the top. I think that's when we talk about this defense, the continuity that those safeties have, and I include Xavier Scott in that mix at nickel, that's just huge, absolutely huge, and not having one play change the tide of the entire game. That secondary is taking a heck of a step forward this year, and those three are a huge reason.
Well, and a thing I think we got to talk about is tackling in space, right? Because Nick Singleton in space, some of these wide receivers in space, even Tyler Warren with how big he is. I think it's important you have a good tackling secondary. And Xavier Scott has been a phenomenal tackler. Caleb Patterson has been a phenomenal tackler. I thought Terrence Brooks has shown that he can be a really good tackler. I think Miles Scott has taken a huge step forward, being more reliable in that. But, Matthew Bailey, I think this is a big game. He's missed a couple tackles, but he's really physical in the box. Dylan Rosiak, those guys got to wrap up in space against some really good athletes here.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure we'll get to that here at our next one, if I had to guess, Jeremy.
Yeah, here we go. All right, number 6 for your Illini picks to click at Penn State. Before we get to that, Joey, I do want to say what we did last week. We each got one, by the way. You picked Pat Bryant. That's a check mark for you. I had Zachary Franklin. Matthew Bailey, you picked for defense. I had Dennis Briggs Jr., so I will give myself a check mark for that defense. So we each got one. Way to go there. So who do you got on offense?
I'm going to take Luke Altmaier. I feel like we are probably getting to the point with him that if they win this week, this has got to be the last one we can pick Luke Altmaier.
Does he have to total 3 touchdowns to get this?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and I'm picking him because I think if you're going into Happy Valley and winning, Luke, I said this about, I don't know, which Kansas maybe, probably, or no, we didn't do picks to click because you forgot to include that. I said it about another game. If you're going in and winning this game, Luke Altmaier's got to be clicking, right? And he's got to probably have 3 touchdowns because for as well as they ran the ball against Nebraska, I want to see that repeated. And I think you've got a defensive front that is going to be challenged to not let them do that against you, which is going to put the ball in the hands of Luke Altmaier to go make some plays.
I kind of want to take the offensive tackles. I kind of want to take Josh McCray doing it again at Happy Valley.
I asked him about that yesterday, and he's like, I don't think about the pass. I'm like,
shit. Yeah, he's been doing that for a little bit. I'm going to go with Caden Fagan. I think they're going to have I think they're going to have some balance. I think he gets a touchdown. He's got a touchdown in every game but one, and that was against Nebraska. Almost got in overtime. I liked what I saw from him. I saw the decisive, I saw the physical guy, and I saw an offensive line that was really blocking well for him on the edge. And you saw when he gets there to that second level, he's a handful and he can really wear on guys. And I think Penn State's linebackers are okay. I think that can be a weakness for them. I think he can get some opportunities in the passing game. So I think Caden Fagan showed why I was so high on him last week. And I think he has a good game. He might not be the star. Luke Altmaier, of course, has to be. Pat Bryant, of course, has to be. But I think he can be a big reason the offense has success and wins this game.
Is that the Caden Fagan hype train I'm hearing? kind of starting to pull out of the station a little bit now.
Yes, right. All right, defense. Who you got, Joey? I'll let you go.
I got Seth Coleman. The not sack numbers have been there for him. He's got 10 pressures. He was finally given, inexplicably, he was not given a sack at the moment at Nebraska, but the pressures are there. He pops onto film, right? Like, he is disruptive as heck on that defensive front. And we've seen with him that these sacks, like when that switch goes, it really, really goes. Mm-hmm. Like in terms of like sacks are usually, it's like in the rule of 3 or whatever, right? Like where he gets red hot for a stretch. And I think the play has indicated he's kind of playing at like the level of that stretch. You just haven't seen the sacks come. He's got 10 pressures. He's disruptive all over the place. I think he gets maybe a couple this week. Now, I say that the tackles for Penn State have given up like 4 pressures all season, but I know the tackles at Penn State have seen Seth Coleman to this point this season. So it feels like it could set up well for him to go out there and get 1.5, 2 maybe, or a couple tackles for loss. I just think that his play has justified that.
You feel tempted to take, a corner or a safety because they can get a pick, right? And Torrey Cox made a huge play. We've seen Xavier Scott and Miles Scott make big plays. Drew Allar just doesn't put the ball in harm's way all that much. So in the year of our Lord, 2024, Joey, I'm picking a running back. I'm picking a running back and a linebacker. Give me Dylan Rosiek forcing a fumble that is needed. They need some takeaways in this game, right? Dylan Rosiek is going to get a lot of action here as linebackers usually do, but Singleton and Katron Allen pop one out of there. He's obviously got to be sound against the run. We talked about Matthew Bailey and his big task, but I do like how Dylan Rosiek has played here in recent weeks. He's one of the leaders of this team, and maybe this is the week we see the Rosiek-Hansen forced fumble that really turns the game.
I was just going to ask that. Is this, if he does and Illinois were to win this game, is that on the level of the Hansen-Wisconsin forced fumble?
That's what I'm thinking.
Man.
If you need a takeaway, it might need to be the forced fumble variety this week, right? Because Drew Allar got 3 interceptions in his career so far through 15, 16 games.
Yeah, he protects the ball really, really well. I like that. Mm-hmm. I want to ask because I think it's coming. Is this a Terrence Brooks game?
I think you'll see more of him. What's interesting is these aren't the biggest receivers for Penn State. 6 foot, 6'1". So they're not the biggest guys, but they got speed. So this might be a game you still lean into Torrey Cox. He's so sticky, man, right? Like he's right in the hips of guys. Now, guys can go up and, as we saw against Nebraska and Kansas a few times, they can go up and make a play over him, but he's right there. And he plays through the ball as we saw, or through the end of the play, as we saw last week against Nebraska. So he is vulnerable in some of those things, but he sticks on guys and fast guys. And I know Terrence Brooks is fast, but I love the quickness of what Torrey Cox does. So I think this is a Torrey Cox game, but is it Terrence Brooks over Caleb Patterson game? I don't know. But I do think you're going to see those guys continue to rotate. And I feel comfortable, Joey, with 3 corners there and Xavier Scott bouncing out if you have 2 linebackers. So I feel like cornerback, it might not be your star position, but I feel like it's really solid.
I agree. I think if there were a game for Terrence Brooks to show his 4-star talent, it's on the field against a team loaded with 4 and 5s, right? And we're firmly in the rotation conversation with Terrence Brooks. Like he is absolutely, unquestionably a guy who's going to get rotation snaps, so somewhere in that 20 to 30 range, I think.
14 snaps against Eastern Illinois, none against Kansas, 25 against Central Michigan, 37 against Nebraska. He's trending up, right? He's trending up and getting more playing time. I think, I like rotating all 3 of those guys and playing them 30 plus snaps, right?
Well, we talked about it after the game. I talked to Corey Parker. We'll have that out here throughout the course of this week. They have different body types. And I said, look, I mean, they were going at Torrey Cox late against Nebraska. So what's that do for you to have different physical options? He said, it's great. And Torrey knew that. Torrey knew that it wasn't anything he was doing necessarily wrong. And I'm paraphrasing a little bit. We'll have his quotes online. But it's more like, hey, Terrence just physically, in this instance, matches up a little bit better. And I think to have that buy-in from Torrey Cox to understand that I'm not doing anything wrong. Terrence Brooks is just a little taller than me right now, and he matches up better in this circumstance. And we shouldn't overlook it as we talk about Terrence Brooks being clearly in this rotation now. Pretty good job by Illinois and the people around him and him to work through not being a day one immediate starter and playing 0 snaps against Kansas. There's circumstances where you just kind of lose things after that, right? Like that doesn't always end with snaps gradually going back up. So let's credit to Corey Parker, to Brett Bielema, to Aaron Henry, to Terrence Brooks, to I would assume his dad. I know you talked to him during the commitment process. He's got a really good perspective of things. I would assume he had a role in this. To have him contributing at this point after kind of a rocky start to the season, that's a big deal. That should not be overlooked either.
He came here to be a pro, right? And I think this last month probably taught him the things he needs to do to be a pro. And you're right. Aaron's talked about it. Corey's probably talked about it with you. Like, there needed to be a relationship there to have those kind of tough conversations. It's also credit to them for going to get a Torrey Cox who can push him. So they, even if he wasn't, consistent in practice, they just had to go, he's our best guy. We got to throw him in. No, we got another guy.
Developing Caleb Patterson, right?
Yeah. Like, you have those other guys who can play well enough to push them. And listen, Tyler Strain hasn't played a lot yet. They were really high on what he could do. So that just tells you how far they've come. But yeah, it's a credit to all those guys, as you said, to, hey, we need to see better from you. And Terrence didn't run from that. He's like, okay, he bought in and found a way. So absolutely, that is huge. Any other things you want to get to?
An airplane, but
not really any good routes into State College, Joey.
It's cool environment, cool atmosphere. It's going to be fun, right? Like, this 6:30 NBC, Illinois, Penn State. Like, they got a lot of eyeballs. I know Fox threw out all of its ratings numbers this week, and Illinois had a ton of eyeballs on it against Nebraska. Just zoom out for a minute, Jeremy. This, like, we've seen this, the 11 o'clock game tucked away on the Big Ten Network and covering this program. I get it.
See at 11 and you're getting beat by 50 points.
That's right. Like, I get that Penn State is a big draw, but man, Illinois has really put itself in a position to earn these primetime slots, these meaningful slots. And it's not a TV network, kind of the last to choose the game. Like, oh God, here we go. All right. We'll host this 28-point game. We'll be happy to do it.
Biggest game in the Big Ten this week, right?
It's probably right. Yeah.
We're schedule right now.
And I just don't want to overlook just how far things have come in that regard. And the fact that this program is back where it's going, I guess, or kind of on its way to that level. Getting in this time slot's a big deal. And it's a good chance for recruiting, for program identity, to have a chance to go in there and really, really make some noise.
Yeah, I want to bring off another one. Another guy like Terrence Brooks bought in. Feels like Malik Elsie is too, right? Like, this is a guy that should be probably playing a little bit more, but Sakari Franklin and Pat Bryant are so good that it's hard to take them off the field. But he comes in and he's a show of your depth that is greatly improving in this program and contributes. Good blocker, made a big catch, got some yak. So kudos to him for really buying into the process. And if you're him, you're sitting there going, man, this could be really good next year for me. Like, Pat Bryant, Sakari Franklin are gone. I've learned from them. Luke Altmaier probably back, and here we go. Like, I'm going to be one of the top targets here. So kudos to them for that. Yeah, looking at the Big Ten schedule is by far the best matchup on the schedule. Washington at Rutgers is a 2.5-point spread. Maryland at Indiana. Indiana's probably got some confidence in Kurt Cignetti right now. Minnesota at Michigan. Don't think that one's going to be close. Nebraska at Purdue. It's going to be interesting to see what that home crowd in West Lafayette thinks. Wisconsin at USC. Wisconsin ain't the same program anymore. Ohio State at Michigan State, and Oregon at UCLA. Feels like a lot of blowouts across the board here.
It does. Some of us, as we were waiting for interviews today, we're trying to figure out.
Michigan's only 1-point favorite against Minnesota.
Yeah. This week, it's so different from the next time Illinois plays, where it's the Purdue game at home. If you're trying to zoom ahead for game times, Ohio State, Oregon, Penn State, USC, those are going to be the top two off the TV network's draft boards. Right?
11A.
I mean, I think Wisconsin and Rutgers or Washington and Iowa will have some draw too. It could end up that way, right? That could be an 11 a.m. game against Purdue, but only by way of Ohio State, Oregon, and Penn State, USC being the same week, because those are like those two matchups are why this is all happening right now in the Big Ten, right? Is to blend all of that together. I mean, that's a heck of a weekend in college football. And Illinois gets Purdue.
All right, we got plenty more coming up this week. I got my preview and picks coming up with all of our predictions. We'll see if anybody is bold enough this week, after we were all cowards, to not pick Illinois, as Brett Bielema pointed out, at Nebraska.
You didn't call us cowards. You just called you one.
You didn't pick them either. Barely any Illinois fans picked them to win that game. So, yeah, we'll have that coming out later. I got some reaction from recruits. Joey, of course, going to have so much more from players and coaches as we go through this week. We'll have our Know Your Foe coming up with some insight on Penn State as well. But for Joey Wagner, for Tyler Donahue, who joined us earlier in this podcast, appreciate you guys listening to the Illini Inquirer podcast. Give us a follow, rating, review wherever you get your podcast. Hit that like button on YouTube, hit the subscribe button, and the notifications bell. But we will talk to you guys after the Penn State game. Everybody have a great day. Take care of each other. We'll talk to you next time on the Illini Inquirer podcast.